have other two options as well, like the invoice options and the payment option. So this
Okay.
specifies that how do we want to utilize or how do we want to manage our invoicing and the payments.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see here, so we have two things called invoice currency and the payment currency. So in this
Okay.
case, so this is one thing that is different from EBS. So in EBS, if you see, I cannot
Mm-hmm.
have invoice in one currency and payment in one currency. But whereas
Mm.
if you see it here in Fusion, I can have in different currencies. I can
Okay.
select maybe the invoice in USD and I can select the payable, I mean payment in maybe I will
Euros
select
or
INR.
Indian rupees.
Yeah, I can have this way.
Okay.
Yeah. And after selecting this invoice currency and payment currency, we have something called pay group. So
Mm-hmm.
pay group is nothing but it is kind of an categorization that to make our payment, our schedule our payments.
Okay.
So let's take an example where I'm dealing with multiple payment processing. So let's say
Mm-hmm.
I have one payment group for maybe the stationaries and the other
Mm-hmm.
payment group for maybe FIBO matched invoices for particular department and the other
Mm-hmm.
part I have for maybe the particular team that is working for the manufacturing unit so that
Okay.
I can prioritize my this one the payments. This is one option. And the other way
Mm-hmm.
to utilize the pay group is that I can select or I can give this particular pay group while
Mm-hmm.
making the PPR, that is payment process, which will be processed in batch. So
Mm-hmm.
while giving there, I can just attach this pay group. So I will not make each invoices. So instead, what I'll do is that I'll pick this pay group and
Mm-hmm.
whatever invoices that is unpaid in this particular pay group, I'll select
Mm-hmm.
those invoices and I'll make the payment.
Okay.
So that is the advantage of having the pay group.
So typically, what are the how do you create a pay group in the sense like, let's say, is it based on department or whatever, right? I'm just throwing it out there. Typically, what is the
Yeah.
criteria that you use?
Yeah, so this is basically the customer specific. So, for example, let's say I have seen the education and the insurance and the manufacturing sector. So, if I want to
Mm-hmm.
speak on the insurance side, so on the insurance side, basically we have a categorization called for returns we have one pay group, and
Mm-hmm.
for excess collection we have one pay group and for this one the non-core part of the transaction. So for that we have
Okay.
another pay group. So similarly we can segregate even in the
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing sector. So basically we have different pay groups defined for the location wise and the other things as well. So this is kind of an customer specific requirements. So based on
Okay.
that we can create any number of pay groups.
Okay.
Yeah. So it is just the payment priority. So I'm just leaving it as it is. So how do we want to process it? And then we have the
So
payment.
what does that mean? 99 payment priority 99. What does that
So which
mean?
means this is under, I mean, medium level priority. We don't have a specific this thing. Noting that since we are processing through this pay group and the other things, so
Uh-huh.
we don't have much identification for this particular item called payment priority. So, I
Okay.
mean, I haven't seen anyone changing this. I mean, most of the clients have seen using 99.
Mhm.
So
So
that's
it's
why,
like a kind of just set because it's nothing to do with any invoice number or anything.
yeah,
It's just that based on the priority level.
yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Then we have the payment terms. So the payment terms would be the immediate and the other things which we defined last day.
Hmm.
So since I have selected this one SWBU, so I'm seeing
Hmm.
only one option. So if I would
Hmm.
have selected the business unit called SW underscore business unit, I would have
Hmm.
seen the net 30 also since I have attached to it for two payment terms. But
Okay.
this particular reference data set SW underscore, I mean
Hmm.
underscore
Just
RBS,
one.
yeah, just one. So that is why I'm seeing only one option.
So it's that payment priority is a free form text, right?
Yeah.
So how would we know which is priority, highest priority or lowest or middle? What are the numbers? How do we know?
Yeah, one is highest priority,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe 50 I could say medium, and 100 or maybe crossing that I could say the least priority.
Okay.
So because here if you see in case of priority, so this is just an what you call the display purpose thing. So
Okay.
where this will not play a major role in terms of functionality. So that is why I'm
Okay.
just leaving as it is.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. No, I just wanted to,
Yeah, yeah,
understand if there was any other number that could be given.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what the payment term will basically define that how do we want to manage our payments. So in this case, I
Mm-hmm.
have selected immediate. So which means, let's say I have an invoice that is dated
Mm-hmm.
on. Just give me a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry for it.
No, not a problem.
Yeah. So I mean, we were seeing payment terms, I think. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say today I'm booking this particular invoice. So which means on the basis of the invoice date, so
Mm-hmm.
system will calculate the payment term. So that is what we say term date basis. So if I say my payment term is immediate or
Mm-hmm.
30 days, from
Mm-hmm.
which date we should calculate this particular day, 0 days or 30 days. So here we
Okay.
have a different option. Either I can give invoice date or I can say invoice receive date. We have a column to mention
Okay.
invoice receive date, or we can select
Uh-huh.
the system date. So
System
I
day.
might do the backdated entry as well. Let's say I'm into 17th of October. So I might do
Mm-hmm.
transaction on maybe 10th of October as well. So on that case, the
Mm-hmm.
system will pick the 17th October as an basis to calculate the payment terms.
Mm-hmm.
So based on the
Mm-hmm.
payment terms, basically system is scheduling the payments to actually when I should process this payment.
Mm-hmm.
So these are the multiple option, and the other one is goods receive date. So when we receive the item. So this will be applicable only for the PO based invoices.
Okay.
So other thing, three things we can use it, but this is PO based this thing parameter.
But typically they use invoice date, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So the pay date basis. So pay date basis
So when
either.
we do this, right, a quick question here. So
Yeah.
let's say I'm doing the configurations at the
Okay.
office.
Okay.
And when I select this one, do we have to sit with the business and tell them what options are available and what they expect to put there?
No, we will not get the, I mean, will not show the options that we are having it here. So instead, we
Uh-huh.
will get this as a requirement, like how they are managing in the existing environment, so the
Okay.
existing system. So how is that payment terms are managed, or how are we managing I mean, how are we managing the payments to the vendor? So that would be one question. And
Mm-hmm.
let's say there is a return, so how are we managing it? That would be the second question. And if
Okay.
I have created the invoices today, so when will I pay this particular invoice to the supplier? So do we have any logic for this to build it, or whether we will pay it immediately, or we have any negotiation with the vendor? So that will be our question. So based on this inputs, we will configure these things like the immediate 30 days and the other options. So by getting this input, we will know that whether we wanted to select the invoice date or system date or invoice receipt date. Because some cases we might have the invoice date in a specific date, and invoice receipt date would be different date. So based on the requirement, we will define these things. So it is purely depending on the requirement of the customer, but we will not show the setups to the customer. So we will show this only in the BR100 document. Yeah, fine.
I'm on mute, sorry. Um, so yeah, so what I was saying is, so in case of, let's say, when we are there with the client, so basically when you actually discuss the whole thing, and you as a consultant should pretty much know what the configurations would be. So you will discuss that with the business and tell them, this is what I'll need. Is that true?
Yeah. So yes. Uh,
I mean, let's say I want, or what are the payment terms you would want to see in the new system, and then on what date or terms do you want your invoices to be processed and all that. You ask the questions, and then they give these details, right?
yeah. We will ask the questions, and based on those inputs from the customer, so we
Mm-hmm.
will decide whether we wanted to choose whether the invoice date or system date. But we will not
Okay.
directly ask the client that how do we wanted to manage the payment term, whether it is based on invoice date or this thing. So this we should
Okay.
suggest them that for this kind of scenarios we can utilize this option.
Okay. So how would you know what? How would you suggest that? I mean, based on what?
So let's say there is a scenario that
Mm-hmm.
I am into this AP requirement gathering, CRP1 maybe I would say.
Okay.
So in this phase, let's say there is a requirement that
Mm-hmm.
customer says that in our existing process, what
Mm-hmm.
we do is that we receive this physical copy of the invoice. So that is
Mm-hmm.
today. So
Mm-hmm.
after receiving the physical copy, so it will
Mm-hmm.
take maybe two days or sometime to
Mm-hmm.
complete the entire invoicing activities, because we have other approvals and the other things also involved into it, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
the verification part of it, so which will take
Mm-hmm.
2 days. So which means my invoice receive date is 17th, and
Mm-hmm.
the invoice that I'm booking is on 19th of October.
Okay.
And the payment term that it should work is something like this, where if this is a vendor A, so for
Mhm,
vendor A, basically the payment term should be 30 days. If this
mhm,
is a vendor B, it should be 45 days. So for those kind of vendors, I will use this payment term, and the other vendors I might use different payment terms. But I don't have anything called immediate payment. Since I'm
mhm.
working in the manufacturing industry, I don't have any such thing called immediate payments. So for
Okay.
this case, what we will do is that we will basically configure the system in a way that the payment terms will be attached at the supplier side, but not at the invoice option. Which means
Mhm,
this invoice options that I'm giving it here, this immediate.
mhm,
So this will
mhm.
be overridden by the attachment that I have made in the supplier side,
Okay.
and
So
the
let's say the supplier site has net 30. So the system will take net 30?
yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I will choose this date as an this on the system date. The
Mhm,
reason for this is that because I received the invoice on different date, and
mhm.
I'm entering in a different date. I might enter a backdated invoice date. So I cannot take invoice date in this case. And if the user has entered the invoice receive date, I can utilize that and I can make that. But if that is not the case, on the rare case, we will use the system date. So
Okay.
for the current scenario that we discussed, I would say that this would be invoice receive date,
Okay.
since this is a non-PO. In case of PO, it would be different. But our case,
Hmm.
still, it will be invoice receive date.
Okay. So let's assume, if a company has, we can define any, immediate net 30, net 45, or whatever, depending on how they want it.
Yes.
So, but this immediate can be used across the board, right? Because if, let's say, on a regular basis, they would use probably net 30. Let's say there are one-offs that they want to do immediately, then they should have the option to do immediate also, right?
Yeah, yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is when we will attach the reference data set. So based on the reference data set that we have attached it, so we'll be able to
Mm-hmm.
access it.
Yeah, but then if that's the case, when you change the, let's say, reference data set here, you choose as immediate, and then your supplier side says net 30, and let's say I've made an invoice, whatever I have, I've entered an invoice, and now I want to make the payment immediately. So, but the supplier side needs to be changed to immediate just to process that one a single invoice, right?
No, I can change it at the invoice. I don't need to go and change at the supplier side. So why we are
Oh,
doing
you can
this? For,
directly change
yeah,
it at the invoice itself. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. The reason we are
Because you
doing,
went, no, the reason I was saying that scenario is because you said immediate, I mean, like supplier side payment term would override the payment terms on this invoice options, right? So I was
yeah,
thinking in that way.
yeah. So these are the setups that we are trying to make it, so
Uh-huh.
that we will not allow user to enter it every time. So that will be a manual data entry process. So for those
Okay,
process,
okay,
we are just trying to automate it. So if the
okay.
setup of payment terms is not available at the supplier side, system will
Uh-huh.
pick from the invoice option. So if this is not attached
Okay,
here, so system will not allow us to move ahead. So this is
okay,
one
okay.
thing. So even though I have
Mm-hmm.
attached it, let's say in a case that we don't
Mm-hmm.
have anything attached to the particular vendor site, but I
Mm-hmm.
have attached it here in the payment terms. So that is immediate.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
instead of selecting vendor A, I have selected vendor A, which means for vendor A it is an immediate. For vendor B,
Mm-hmm.
it should be net 30. So in this case, even though
Mm-hmm.
I haven't given at, since I haven't given at the supplier side, system
Mm-hmm.
will pick from the invoice option. So that will be immediate. So in the invoice page, what I will do is that from this immediate, I'll change it
Mm-hmm.
to net 30, provided I have given access to the reference data set to my particular business unit.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, let's move on.
yeah, yeah. So and then we have pay date basis. So whether we are paying on the basis of due date or on the basis of discount date. So mostly it will be on due date, because it is not that all vendors or the all customers business process will have the concept
Mm-hmm.
of discount and the other things. So maybe
Yeah.
if there is a requirement that we wanted to capture based on the discount date, so that we can do it. But mostly it will be due date basis.
Okay. So is there a possibility to add anything under the selection, or it's like,
No,
um, no, right?
yeah,
Okay.
no.
What Oracle gives, that's it. You can't customize anything and put it there in the pay databases or anything.
Yeah, because we have a lot of business logics defined for this particular one field called due date or
Due
the
date.
discount date. So if we
Okay.
wanted to add it, so we will
Uh-huh.
have to procure the pass model. So from the
Oh.
past model, we will need to define our own business logic, and we need to define it under the lookups. So we have
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lookup called pay date, I think. I don't remember exactly. So there we will need to add it. And on top
Mm-hmm.
of this lookup, we will need to do the code changes to the existing this thing in the past model. But in SaaS
Okay.
model, we will not be able to make any changes to this particular selection.
Okay. So when it's SaaS and you want something, right? Do you have to say, open an SR and send it to Oracle?
No, we cannot change it.
We cannot change it no matter what.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, SaaS is something that whatever Oracle gives, we are just utilizing as it is.
Okay.
Yeah, pass is the one that it will allow us to handle the
Mm-hmm.
application and the data.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other option is accounting date basis. So how do we want to have our accounting date basis? So whether it
Mm-hmm.
is invoice date or system date. So the GL date basically. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say I create an invoice today. So
Mm-hmm.
since I have selected here as an invoice date, system will say that the invoice date is 17th October. So GL date is also 17th October. So let's say I have selected system date. So which means even though my invoice date is 17th of maybe 10th of October, but system
Mm-hmm.
date is 17th of October. So by
Mm-hmm.
default, system will pick 17th of October since I have selected system date. So
Okay.
again, this can be overridden in the invoice screen.
Okay.
Yeah, I can change the dates
Okay.
provided the GL periods are open.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And
similarly,
you show me that on the invoice when we do that, so that
yeah, sure.
I can relate
Yeah, yeah,
the
sure.
dates.
Yeah, yeah, sure. And we have the budget date basis. So how do we want to handle
Accounting
our
date.
budget date? So again, I'm giving it
System date. Okay.
yeah, system date. And
So what happens when you don't use budget? You said budget creation is optional, right? I
yeah,
mean setups.
yeah, having budget is optional, but here Oracle has given this as a mandatory. So even though if we are not using it, we can just say but system date when we
Mm-hmm.
are utilizing the budget part, this will be
Mm-hmm.
taken care of. This parameter will be utilized. Till
Okay.
then, this will be not used, but still we
Mm-hmm.
will give the value.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what is the importance of that budget date basis?
Important in the sense if you are using the budget, so this will become a mandatory setup for us.
Oh, for if you're using the budget, but in case you're not using it, there's no point in.
Yes, correct.
Okay, but just that it's since it's a mandatory field, we're filling it up with system date.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
I'm just trying to relate why and
yeah,
where.
yeah, correct. Yeah. And then we have the quantity tolerance and the amount tolerance. So that we
Hmm.
saw yesterday. So that one.
Okay,
So we are
so
just
is it the same?
yeah, same thing.
So if we give, let's say, our common options for payables and procurement, if you give there, you don't have to give it here.
No,
No, that
we,
was under different one. Sorry, whatever,
yeah,
whichever
yeah.
that was. But uh,
It is under tolerance. So if we have
yeah,
different there, so
tolerance.
we can utilize it here.
Okay, so either or, you can either do it
Yeah.
there or here.
Yes.
Okay.
No, no. We will do it there and we will attach it here.
Oh, okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah. And we have the invoice grouping. So maybe if we wanted to have the invoice grouping, so we can utilize this. So this is kind of a batch process where I will
Uh-huh.
have specific batches.
Mm-hmm.
In a day, maybe I'll run 10 batches. So
Mm-hmm.
if I wanted to group this particular invoices, then I can mention it here.
What do you base the group on, invoice grouping? I know I've seen that in the company that I've worked everywhere. I've seen that, but what is that basis? I mean, like, invoice, how do you group those?
Yeah. So let's take an example that I have maybe two kind of transaction. So
Mm-hmm.
that is for maybe in a period. I would give two scenarios. So for
Mm-hmm.
the first scenario,
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking this based on the period. So what I will do is that I will say to the system that for this particular period called October, so
Mm-hmm.
I will have a control amount of let's say 1,000 invoices. So I will not
Mm-hmm.
be able to create the invoices above 1,000. So this is kind of a control over the invoicing.
Okay.
So this we could say that estimation and the forecast part, we will see this. And
Mm-hmm.
apart from this, so this will be one part on the selecting the batches based on the period. So the other side of it is based on the transaction. Transaction in the sense it is not the invoices or the credit memo, debit memo. So it is
Mm-hmm.
based on the transaction of the customer, which means
Mm-hmm.
customer might have different transaction like the stationery purchase, and they might have the particular raw material. Let's say they have 10 raw material. So in this, if they wanted to group each raw material under a single batch, so they can utilize, so they can utilize this option.
Okay, so the criteria can be based on the business and what the business wants,
Yeah,
how you want to group the invoices.
yeah, correct.
Okay.
So I can group at any level. Like if I wanted to have control on the raw material, I can have it, or maybe on the expenses, particular expenses. Still, I can have this.
So now let's assume you go ahead and check that require invoice grouping. So
Yeah,
where do you actually define the grouping? It's somewhere else, not on the screen,
yeah, not on
right?
the, yeah, not on.
Okay, that's fine. Let's move on.
And we have allow document category override. So document
Mhm,
category override is something like an voucher number. So we
mhm,
have two numbering systems in invoice screen or the AP invoices. So one is the
mhm,
normal invoice number, so that we are
mhm,
generating,
mhm,
and the other one is this one voucher number, that we will define document sequence. So based
mhm,
on this sequence, so basically we will generate the voucher numbers. So
mhm,
here, this document sequence will be always based on the ledger but not on the operating unit. So let's say
mhm,
there is a rare case where we have an structure this way, that we have one ledger. So under this one
mhm,
ledger, we have one legal entity. Under this one
mhm,
legal entity, let's say I have 100 different operating unit or the business unit. So in this
mhm,
case, if I wanted to define document category for each business unit, I cannot
mhm.
define it. And since this is a SaaS model, so there is no workaround also. So in case of
Can you repeat that?
yeah, so document sequencing will work based on the ledger. So
Yes.
in this case,
Uh-huh.
for this scenario, I have one ledger, one
Uh-huh.
legal entity, and under this
Okay.
legal entity, I have 100 business units defined. So which
Okay.
means I have an centralized operational, where head
Mhm,
office will maintain all those things, or head office will monitor all those accounts. So in this
mhm,
case, I have defined only one ledger. So under this, I have given multiple operating unit. So
mhm,
if I wanted to maintain the document sequence by operating unit, so this is not
mhm.
possible. So if this is
Okay.
the past model, so I can do customizations. So I can
Okay.
say that under this field, so this is the
Mhm,
field that I should pick it. So for this, I'll
mhm,
write a script or the web
mhm,
services. So after
mhm,
writing this, so whenever I'm creating this, so system will call this particular API, and system
mhm,
will generate the numbering for each business unit.
mhm,
So the reason why I wanted to have the what do you call the voucher number for each business unit is that when I have one ledger and I'm spreading it across the business unit, so
mhm,
my first document sequencing number or the voucher number would be starting from
mhm,
one. So
mhm,
let's say I'm going live for all the branches, all the 100 branches. So in this
mhm,
case, what will happen
mhm,
is that I have 01 or 001 in
mhm,
business unit 1. At the same
mhm.
time, business unit 2 also doing the transaction. So 2 will happen in the business unit 2. Again,
Mhm,
simultaneously, business unit 1 is doing another transaction. So this will
mhm.
have document sequencing as 003. So which means I will not have sequence in this part. So
Okay,
this
it'll be
will have,
skipped.
yeah. So here we will have lot of audit issues.
Mhm,
So what will happen is that when we are doing this audit and the compliance part, so the
mhm,
auditor might raise a question that why we are seeing a gap between the particular invoices. So
mhm,
did we do any malpractice, or did we delete any particular transaction from the system? That is the
mhm,
reason why we are having this gap between each sections. So this will
mhm.
be an audit issue. So that is the reason always we need to be little cautious while defining the document category or framing our structure based on this. So this will have an effects on this.
Okay. So let's assume I always add this question. Let's say there, like, when you do an interface or something and you bring in lots of invoices and transactions, right?
Yeah.
They have the numbers, let's say transaction number or the invoice numbers.
Yeah.
So when the numbers are there and they have a sequence, because they are coming through that interface or whatever. And then sometimes when you do it manually also, you have some of the numbers are the same, but the source is different.
Okay, the invoice source.
Does it make sense? Yeah, the invoice source, right? Sometimes the source is manual because you're entering it manually in the system,
Okay.
but sometimes it's like,
Yeah, different
like through
approach.
an yeah, whatever. So what I'm saying is, let's say there are two invoice numbers of the same, like one and one.
Okay.
One is coming, the source is different, and so in that case, only people have to check the source and determine where it's coming from, and that's all, right? There's no other way to, because that's the only way to differentiate,
Yeah.
right?
So yeah.
Between the
So
same sequence, I mean, same numbers of
yeah.
documents.
Yeah. So that is why we have this one document sequence. So invoice
Okay.
number is different from the document sequence. So
Okay.
document sequence cannot be duplicated, even though category is different. So we will have this one because if you
Oh,
see this,
so a
yeah,
document category is unique.
yes, correct.
Ah,
If
okay.
you see invoice number, so that is manual. So I can just
Uh-huh.
enter by seeing the physical copy of the bill. I can enter the invoice number as it is, or if I have a specific sequence should to be entered, so I can utilize that.
Uh-huh.
So apart
Uh-huh.
from that, it is not an automated one where I don't have an system where I will enter it in a sequence. But
Okay.
whereas in the voucher number or the document category, it will be always in sequence.
Uh-huh.
So we have an option also there where we can enable gapless invoices.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
So this is how we will have control over it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Fine.
Yeah, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next option would be allow adjustment to the paid invoices. So whether we wanted to allow the adjustment to the paid invoices. Maybe if we disable this option, which means the adjustment is not allowed for the paid invoices. So I cannot
Mm.
revert it back or I cannot void this particular transaction.
Mm.
So only option would be to reverse or cancel this particular payment or the invoices. So
Okay.
if I allow this, I can make the adjustment to the paid invoices as well.
Hmm. But is that typically turned on?
No, it again depends on client whether they wanted to have control or maybe there will be cases where users might do as a part of closure activities or anything
Hmm.
that is
Hmm.
happened by mistake. Uh,
Okay.
yeah, so this should be decided by the customer.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have remit to supplier override for the third party payments. So basically,
Hmm.
what is third party payments? So third party payment is something will work like this. So I have a vendor called vendor A. So this
Hmm.
vendor A, he will have an trading relationship or maybe an what do you call it, the joint venture or any relation with the vendor B. So
Hmm.
vendor A has sold a particular amount of goods to vendor B. So vendor B
Hmm.
has to owe maybe 10,000 rupees to vendor A. So
Hmm.
in this case, maybe vendor A has to collect a specific amount from us and
Hmm.
we have to pay maybe the same 10,000. So instead of vendor
Hmm.
A paying to vendor B, so what
Hmm.
vendor A will request to us is that directly pay to the vendor B. So this is what we call
Okay.
third party payments. So
Okay.
here, whether we wanted to allow override for the remit to supplier address. So if we enable
Okay.
this option, we will be able to override it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Damn it.
And
Okay.
then, yeah, fine.
Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. Then we have the recalculate the invoice installments. So
Hmm.
which means after adjustments, maybe the invoice date would be changed. Let's say I have selected immediate and now I
Hmm.
have changed it to 7 days maybe. So
Hmm.
whether I wanted system to recalculate this particular installments. So I can
Hmm.
give enable this option to
Okay.
recalculate it.
Okay.
And I
So
have,
what?
yeah.
So we can check all these, right?
Yeah, we can check it. Like this will, if you are checking all these things, we will have more or strict
More
control
checks and
over the.
balances.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Then we have the hold unmatched invoices. So I will enable
Mm-hmm.
this only when I have the PO based invoices. So which means this, if I have enabled this particular option, so if I'm having an invoice as an maybe the manual one or the invoice without the purchase order number, so system will
Mm-hmm.
not allow me to proceed further. Our system will keep this particular invoice under hold. So unless
Mm-hmm.
I have the purchase order created, so
Mm-hmm.
I'll not be able to create the or complete the invoice.
Okay.
So for that purpose, I'm just disabling this option.
Okay.
Yeah. Then
So you're disabling that. Okay.
yeah,
What was the basis you said? Something you said basis on.
no, not basis. So let's take a case where I have an manufacturing unit. So in this
Mm-hmm.
particular business unit that is assigned for this manufacturing unit,
Mm-hmm.
always I will create only the items that is required for this manufacturing unit or the inventory that is working under this manufacturing unit. So I will
Mm-hmm.
not make any stationary or any non-business related transactions. So in this
Mm-hmm.
case, what I can do is that I can give this option hold unmatched invoices. So which means
Mm-hmm.
when this user is trying to create an invoice that is not based on the requirement raised by the manufacturing department, system will
Mm-hmm.
hold and system will not allow this particular user to create the invoice. So for those
Mm-hmm.
cases, I can utilize this.
Okay.
If I have enabled this option, so system
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm doing a manual invoice. So system will
Mm-hmm.
restrict me saying there is a hold in the invoice. So unless I
Ah, okay.
release this hold, I'll not be able to validate this invoice or complete this invoice.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. We'll
Yeah.
move on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the next option is that enable invoice account coding workflow. So this is completely depending on the custom flows that we have, the SLA and the other things. So I'm
Okay.
disabling this option as well since we don't have any setups that is defined for invoice account workflows.
So where does this come? I mean, like when do we use this in SLAs?
Yeah, when we are defining SLAs, we will utilize this, but I haven't used this option actually.
Okay.
So even I know this as in theoretically, so this is the functionality, but even I haven't utilized this option.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next option that we have is that prevent deletion of invoice attachments. So
Mm-hmm.
normally when we are processing this invoices from maybe the purchase department, so there will be
Mm-hmm.
an attachment from the purchase department stating this is the purchase order and this is the invoice physical copy. Maybe instead of
Okay.
transferring as a physical one, so it is not possible for all the business units. So for those
Mm-hmm.
cases, what we can do is that we can have this as an attachment and we
Mm-hmm.
can transfer as a part of the matching the invoice with the purchase order. So
Mm-hmm.
in this case, whether I wanted to prevent the deletion of the invoice attachments.
Mm-hmm.
So if I enable this option, user will not be able to delete the attachments.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that is the functionality.
Okay.
And then we have receipt acceptance days. So
But
we
so which is better to prevent deletion of invoice attachments is better or leave it unchecked?
yeah, in real time, prevent deletion of invoice attachment would be a better option
Mm-hmm.
because the particular manager will get to know that what is happening in the system exactly. If he sees the
Uh-huh.
workflow history, so he'll be able to
Mm-hmm.
see all the details. So if we
Yeah.
have disabled this option, user can
Uh-huh.
delete one attachment and he can add another attachment.
Okay.
Yeah. So then we have the receipt acceptance days. So maybe we can
Mm-hmm.
give a particular day for this matching. So acceptance is something that we are accepting this receipt and we are proceeding with the invoice. So if we wanted to
Okay.
give particular days, we can mention it here.
Particular days in the sense like Monday, Tuesday, like that,
No,
or
like 3 days, 4 days, 5 days.
oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And then we have allow final matching. So allow final matching is nothing but we are trying to match the purchase order.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have allow matching distribution override. So when we are
Mm-hmm.
doing this final matching, whether we wanted to have the override at the distribution. So
Mm-hmm.
basically when we are matching this purchase order, so it will be on line level also at the distribution level. So if we
Mm-hmm.
enable this option, so which means header level information can be overridden at the distribution.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the functionality of this.
Okay.
And we have transfer PO distribution additional information. So which means I have the DFF. So DFF is nothing but to capture the additional information. So let's say
Mm-hmm.
we have an requirement that I wanted to capture a field called maybe this is an inventory unit 1 or inventory unit 2. Maybe we have an boolean value yes or no. So in this
Mm-hmm.
case, when I'm creating the purchase order, so I will mention that whether this is an yes or no. But when I'm
Mm-hmm.
creating this AP invoice, so
Mm-hmm.
in invoice screen, I will not have this options because we
Okay.
don't have this DFF defined for invoices.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is a possibility that this invoice creator or the accountant
Mm-hmm.
should understand whether this is based on this particular unit, I mean unit A or unit B. So in this case, if I enable this option called transfer PO distribution additional information, this
Mm-hmm.
invoice creator or the accountant will be able to see this information whether this is an yes or no.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is the functionality of transfer PO distribution additional information.
Okay. So in ABS, right, you get to create DFFs.
Yeah,
Is there a chance you can create those here in Fusion?
yeah, we can create it.
So is it by module you have it? Where do you normally do?
Yeah, it is by module basically.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, by invoice or even for supplier, we can give the DFF.
Okay. You show me one time.
Yeah, yeah, sure, sure. While we are creating supplier, we will see this DFF.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have the discounting part. So discount in the sense whether we wanted to have discount always or
Mm-hmm.
whenever applicable, we will take the discount. So if we
Okay.
enable this option, so system will not allow non-discount invoices. So it is
Mm-hmm.
suggested to deselect this option.
What
And
is that? What happens if we select it? Always take discount. Oh, so it's always okay.
yeah,
If you don't have any discount, then no
yeah,
need to check.
yeah.
Okay.
And then we have exclude tax from the calculation. So if you wanted to
Mm-hmm.
exclude the tax part from the discount, so that we can enable. And similarly for the freight part also. So if you wanted to exclude from the discount, we can enable this option.
So when you say freight, right, what does it mean?
The transportation charges.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Just suddenly my brain was like, okay, yeah, got it.
Yeah. So the next one that we have is that discount allocation method. So how do we basically want to allocate our discount, whether it is based on the distribution or it is based on the tax and the distribution or it is for the all lines based on
Mm-hmm.
the complete this thing. So aggregating
Okay,
all.
tell me something. Tell me something. I'm going to go back a step.
Yeah,
So exclude tax from calculation, right?
yeah.
So the tax calculation is excluded based on the employer's discretion.
Employer discretion in the sense.
Employer in the sense like the client, whoever,
Yeah,
whatever.
yes, yeah, yes,
Okay.
correct.
Okay, the client's discretion,
Yeah,
you whether you add the tax or you don't add the tax.
okay.
But this what this guy also has to pay the tax at the end of the year, right?
Yes,
For
correct.
all the things, all the transactions.
Yeah.
So so it's kind of an incentive for their client when you remove exclude tax from their calculations, when you give them a discount,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Is it it's is it I mean what I'm trying to say is it's an additional benefit for them,
Yeah.
right, when you're
Uh,
excluding tax.
I mean, for the customer, you're saying, not for vendor.
Customer or vendor, now I'm confused.
No, customer. No,
Whoever.
like, let's say I'm the company, so which means, let's take the Honeywell case. So I am the company and I'm ordering
Yeah.
some quantity to the vendor, maybe ABC. So he is a vendor to me and I'm a customer to this vendor.
Okay. So now this exclusions or whatever is given by the customer to the vendor or vendor to the customer. How does it work?
No, vendor is giving to the customer.
So vendor is giving to the customer. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So if I say exclude the tax lines, so maybe I have 10% tax rate. So on
Mm-hmm.
10,000, so it is 1,000. So when I'm giving this one exclude tax from the calculation, so system will
Mm-hmm.
not consider this 1,000. I mean the invoice
Yeah.
part. Instead, system will pick the entire 10,000 and calculate the discount. So if I have disabled this option, so which means system will calculate the inclusive of taxes. So which means the discount will be only 9,000.
11,000.
No, 9,000.
Oh, 9,000. Okay. Exclude. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And
and
when discount allocation method, you have all lines. So what does that mean?
yeah, for the entire invoice, 10,000.
Oh, overall amount.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, correct.
And then tax lines and single distribution. What does that mean?
Yeah. So we have the tax lines for each distribution. So system
Yeah.
will calculate the tax lines and it will take the particular distribution line and system will calculate the discount.
Okay.
Let's take a case where I have, let's take the same scenario where I have
Mm-hmm.
created a line called maybe 10,000 and my
Mm-hmm.
tax is 1,000. So which means system will take both the tax and the distribution and system will
Mm-hmm.
calculate the discount.
Mm-hmm.
But whereas if I have enabled the single distribution, so which means
Mm-hmm.
system is considering only the distribution part, but the system is not considering the tax lines.
Okay. But if you select all invoice lines, will the tax lines and the distribution be part of it?
Yeah, it will be part of it
Okay.
because we are taking only the invoice amount as a whole.
Okay. So when we say single distribution, so the entire amount goes to a specific code combination.
Yeah, line wise,
Okay.
basically line wise distribution discount. So let's
Okay.
take a case where I have procured 5 items. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe I have procured laptop, I have
Mm-hmm.
procured maybe 5 desktops and a
Mm-hmm.
monitor and maybe 10 mouse.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, so
Mm-hmm.
discount will be for maybe laptop on 10,000 it would be maybe 200 discount and
Mm-hmm.
for mouse maybe it will be 10 rupees discount similarly for other items as well. So it will be for the line.
Okay.
Yeah, so that is the difference.
Okay.
Yeah, so then
Yeah, we can move on.
yeah, yeah, then we have the prepayment. So prepayment payment terms. So whether we wanted to have any different payment terms. So generally for prepayment it will be always immediate because
Mm-hmm.
unless we make this payment, the prepayment is just like an advance. So
Mm-hmm.
mostly there will be very rare where cases where we will have 30 days net for prepayment because this is an advance payment already.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it will be mostly immediate for the prepayment cases.
So is this reference set similar to the one that we attached on the top, or it can be a different reference set here for prepayments?
Prepayments reference set. Uh,
Let's say payment terms is showing up as immediate, right? On top,
yes,
if you scroll back, there
yes,
also we
yes.
had payment
Yeah,
terms.
that is
That is
true.
immediate.
Yeah,
So that is the reference set that with one immediate we had.
yeah.
So is the same reference set it is looking out, or can we use different reference set there for prepayments?
Different reference set in the sense you are saying about the payment
Let's
terms.
say, yeah, let's for the
Yeah, we
payment
can have.
terms, let's
We
say,
can have.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I can just, for the heck of giving it, I can probably give net 30. I may
yeah.
not use it, but
Yes,
for selections, yeah.
yes. It is possible. So we can say this
Okay.
way. We can select immediate here, and maybe here
Mhm.
I would select maybe 30 days, 40 days.
Okay.
Yeah, that is possible. and the settlement days. So since I have given immediate, so this will be 0.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe if I have selected net 30, it will be 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the use distribution from the purchase order. So if we
Okay.
are having matching the purchase order, so we can utilize the distribution from the purchase order. So
Mm-hmm.
in our case, we don't have the purchase order, so I'm just leaving it open.
Mm-hmm.
And show the available prepayment during the invoice entry. So this will show kind of a pop-up if I select this particular option. So let's say I have two vendors, so that is vendor A
Mm-hmm.
and vendor B. So for vendor
Mm-hmm.
A, I have created an prepayment or the advance payment. So for
Mm-hmm.
this case, so whenever I'm selecting this vendor A, system will give a pop-up saying prepayment is
Mm-hmm.
available for this vendor. So that is the
Mm-hmm.
functionality of this.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we have the approval part. So if
Mm-hmm.
we enable this invoice approval, so we'll be
Mm-hmm.
able to utilize the approval part as well. So it will go to manager and manager will approve it. And
Okay. So the invoice approval, this comes at what stage? I mean,
so
when you're
when we are
entering
doing
the
the
invoice?
transaction, yeah, when we are entering the transaction, we will have to validate it. So after
Mm-hmm.
validating, so we will
Mm-hmm.
do the this one initiate approval. So
Okay.
after this approval, basically it will be routed to the respective manager. So once the manager is approving this, so we will
Mm-hmm.
have the status approved. So after that, we will basically account these transactions.
Okay.
Yeah. So here we will have the relevant setups. If you see here,
Mm-hmm.
account regardless of the approval status. So if you enable this, so
Mm-hmm.
even if the invoice is not approved, I can account this particular invoice. So
Okay.
if I give require accounting before approval, so which means I
Mm-hmm.
have created the invoice, I will validate it, and I
Mm-hmm.
will get it approved. So after that only I can account this transaction or the invoice. And the third,
Uh,
yeah, tell me.
hold on. Require accounting before approval. So
Yeah,
which means the accounting has
yeah,
to
yeah.
be done
I
before
said
it
it
gets approved.
other way. Yeah,
Yeah, the
correct.
other way.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. I'm like, okay, what am I looking at? Okay.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, correct.
The
Uh,
bottom one is what you said earlier.
yes, yes.
Require approval before accounting. Yeah.
Yeah,
But why are they grayed out?
because I didn't enable this option. So
Oh, so only when you enable that, these okay get
yes.
activated. Okay.
Yeah, because these all setups are basically for the invoice. So unless I
Oh, okay.
use this invoice approval, so I will not be
Mm-hmm.
able to see these options.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
do you typically give allow force approval?
Allow force approval, yes, mostly we will give it. So there are rare cases where we might need to do the force approvals. So maybe
Uh-huh.
the workflow has stuck in middle or something. So for those cases, we can utilize this, the allow
Okay.
force approval.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this we can enable like the require validation before approval as well. So
Mm-hmm.
that we will validate it and then we will do the approval. So if I have
Mm-hmm.
disabled this option, which means I will do the approval and then I will validate the invoice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then we have the interest part. So maybe for the late charges, I can charge even the interest for this. So this is
Mm-hmm.
again customer specific. It's not that all customers will have this functionalities.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are enabling this, we will basically create the interest invoice, which means invoice will
Mm-hmm.
generally create an separate copy of it for the interest invoices.
Okay.
So based on the amount that we are specifying it here.
Mm-hmm.
So again here we have two options. So one is single distribution or for the
Mm-hmm.
entire invoice amount. So that we can give it
Mm-hmm.
here. And we will give the code combination here. So what would be
Mm-hmm.
the interest expense account?
Okay.
Yeah. So these are the options that we have for the late charges or the interest calculation.
So interest percentage, who determines that?
Interest percentage. No, we
Let's
have
say,
it.
I mean,
Yeah.
let's say there is $1,000 invoice and that person hasn't paid or the customer hasn't paid to the vendor. So
Okay.
the vendor is going to charge an interest over that $1,000 after a certain period of time.
Yeah.
Let's say after 6 months or 1 year or whatever.
Yeah.
So how on, what's the percentage of interest that gets charged? How do you, I mean, how do we know the vendor is, doing right or wrong?
We don't have
And whether he's
control on.
exploiting, not exploiting, or whatever, right? So let's say, is it 2% interest, 5% interest, or what?
Yeah, this actually we don't have control because if you see this, the invoice entry itself, we are just receiving the bill and we are
Mm-hmm.
just entering whatever we are having it in the bill.
Okay.
So this logic maybe we need to check if we have a specific requirement whether
Mm-hmm.
above this percentage I'll not allow to have the interest charged to this particular vendor. So that we need to check actually.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as my knowledge, it's not there. So maybe I can check and I can get back to you.
Mm-hmm. And a little confused here. Just need little clarification. So interest is, and all these, let's say approvals, prepayment, and all, I can understand.
Okay.
We as a customer are setting up in our system
Okay.
on behalf of the vendor payment,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
interest, why would we care for that fellow's interest?
No, but anyway, we are making payment, right? The for the late charges, I mean late payments. If we are,
Maybe they'll have everything in a contract where it'll say after these
yeah,
days, if you don't pay, you'll have this much amount to pay as interest or whatever.
yes,
I think based on that only we can
yeah,
set this up.
yeah,
Okay, let's move on.
yeah. And then we have the payment request. So that is batch payments basically. So
Hmm.
we have the payment terms. I didn't define it, I think, for the payment part. Uh,
Uh, so it's a separate one that we need to do the reference for part.
Maybe I should take the other business unit, I think. Okay, let me take the next video.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
we didn't enable it for that, I think. Yeah,
Hmm.
maybe I missed to enable this, so we are having it here.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so these are like the priorities, like how do we want to. So I'm just leaving this as it is. And if
Hmm.
I want to select the particular pay group, I can select it. Since I wanted to select at the invoice creation page, so I'm just
Hmm.
leaving this option as it is.
Okay.
Because anyway, I have
So
mentioned it for
you
the
can either select here or there, right? On the top or at the bottom.
yeah
Okay. And then what overrides the other? Or
invoice.
does it matter?
Yeah,
Invoice, okay.
yeah. If it is not there in the invoice, basically it will pick from the payment.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. So apart from that, we have only the self-service invoices. So this is kind of a licensing part, I believe. I don't think it will come along with this particular thing. But I'll just explain what it is. It is like
Hmm.
an self-service invoicing will allow us to basically create an invoice in a simpler form where we will not have the detailed invoicing and the other things. So
Oh,
in EBS, if you see the procurement, self-service procurement is there. Similarly, we have the self-service invoices in
okay.
Fusion. So
Okay.
that is the only difference. So if you see the options, so it
Mm-hmm.
will allow us to limit the invoices to the purchase order. So I can say that on this particular purchase order called 9010, so I can create only two invoices or anything, any number.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to limit, I can limit it.
Okay.
And I have allow invoice backdating. So backdating invoices, if I don't want to enable, I can just leave this. And this is like allow unit price change. Like this we will have the variance between the purchase order and the invoice quantity. So that if you
Yeah.
wanted to restrict, maybe we can restrict it. Yeah. So these are the
Okay.
options that we have in invoice options.
So when you say self-service invoices, right, is this
Yeah.
similar? Is this something related to the invoice workbench or something?
Yeah. Invoice workbench. I mean, it is related. It will look something like our procurement self-service, where we will have the minimal functionalities. So with that, basically,
Hmm.
we can create this.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's it. We have in invoice options.
Okay.
So we'll move to payment options.
So I'll be leaving in another 10 minutes if you don't
Okay.
mind.
Yeah, fine. Then maybe we can stop. Maybe we can see the payment options tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
tomorrow, what time? Uh,
Tomorrow.
I'll 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 email you probably. I mean, not email, but send a message.
Yeah, sure. We can plan accordingly. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.